So I'll start now, and welcome to today's webinar, Ransomware Attacks and the Dangers of Third-Party Access, which we've all seen in the press recently. And Graham, who's on from Assyrium, which is a vendor that we partner with, who deliver privileged access management solutions to plethora of customers, and we partner with. Um, I just wanted to let you know that there is Q&A, and please ask questions as we go along in the chat, and we are recording this as well. So if anybody wants the recording of it afterwards, then please let us know, and we'll send that out to you. I'm Rick Gray. I've been in cybersecurity for way too long, 26 years, and I've been a founder of two managed cybersecurity providers in the UK, and I've got a lot of experience and knowledge dealing with all different types of organisations, from sort of critical national infrastructure companies all the way to education, as Graham and I have just been talking about how heavily they've just been hit by ransomware attacks. I am the head of cybersecurity for Meridian IT, and I'll just go into the agenda for today. So a quick introduction on Meridian IT Group and who we are. I'll pass over to Graham from Assyrium, who will cover the current security landscape. We'll provide an example of a typical ransomware attack, and then we'll get to learn more about Assyrian PAM and the importance of providing least privilege, which we're actually hearing awful lot more about recently. Lots of vendors are talking about least privilege and how important it is. We'll walk you through PAM and Endpoint Manager, which is two products that Assyrium have. And then we'll cover a little bit about all of you are going to have lots of questions to ask, hopefully. Meridian IT. We've been in business for 42 years. We're a privately owned organisation. We're about $500 million globally in revenue. It's quite astonishing that the business has been profitable every year for 42 years, even through the 2008 Lehman Brothers when they fell, and also COVID. The business has predominantly been very heavily into selling storage and IBM Power Solutions. We have around 600 managed service customers across the globe. We're based in 40 global office locations. We have all different types of certifications, and some which are going to be more apparent today and important today: ISO 27001, 9001, and also Cyber Essentials Plus. And we have around 500 technical consultants globally, and we've been in cybersecurity for 26 years. I have to mention this because the organization is very proud of the fact that we became carbon neutral, and there's an awful lot of effort that's gone into this, so they'll kill me if I don't mention this on every presentation that I do. So Meridian, what do we do when it comes to cybersecurity? So we have 4 pillars. Those pillars always start with advisory services. So whether that's security architecture reviews we're doing for people, or security assessments, or pen testing, we do cloud security reviews. We work with many frameworks, of some that you probably heard of, like NIST, MITRE frameworks, ISO 27001, GDPR, PCI, DSS, many of them. We then move into the prevention part of our business, where we help prevent the attacks, whether that's firewalls, IDS, IPS, web application security to protect against DDoS or SQL attacks, etc. Email and cloud, which is probably one of the most attacked vectors or weakest vectors within every organization at the moment. Detection, which I always believe is one of the most important areas, because we can't always stop people getting in, and it's very important today to understand when there's an attacker in the network or any indicators of compromise that are going on. So detection is really important, so that we can minimize the amount of damage that's done when they do come in, and we can identify it quickly and remediate. So we work across network security, application security, data protection services across some unique IBM Power Systems, for instance, email and cloud, and obviously endpoint from a detection perspective. Managed services, we're heavily into managed services. We have a security operations center as a service. We do network detection response. So we're looking for lateral movement across the network so that we can identify abnormalities that are going on. And it's quite hard to monitor that particular space. Web security, so we partner with organizations like Cloudflare and deliver Cloudflare as a service, and then we take all the information out there and plumb it into the SIEM tool and then do all the analysis around that. Managed EDR, endpoint detection response. We do an awful lot around Microsoft at the moment with Microsoft Sentinel in helping deliver those types of services, configuring those for customers and managing those environments moving forward. We also do managed email and CASB, so cloud access security broker, so that we can identify things that are going on in cloud services and SaaS services and email. We do some very smart things in email. And then we have a micro SOC. We call it a micro SOC because we designed this to offer a lighter touch service with a lighter cost associated to it. And the idea around a micro SOC is to deliver it, start small, provide value, and then move to a phased approach and then bring other log sources into this. And it's the best way to show value for us to provide value to you as a customer and to you to provide the value internally up above for the costs that you're paying. And then we do something which is quite unique, which we designed for education, which is a security operations center to really address the safeguarding of pupils and staff within the education institutes. Some of the customers that we deal with today, some that you've probably seen, heard of, National Grid. We do a lot of design work and help to protect a lot of their infrastructure and monitor with SOC services and deliver solutions like Cerium that you'll hear about today. And Sport Radar, interesting organization. So they actually collate all the data for all the betting companies, and they have to work very quickly because all the odds are based on the information that they provide into the betting companies. And in lockdown, all the betting companies, all the sporting events stopped, so it was a massive impact to them and the betting companies, and they came up with they were the first people to design a virtual football game based on FIFA, the game FIFA, and they started to have this random scoring mechanism around that so that people could bet to, and it actually became more popular than real football games for them. PaySafe, a big online payment organization globally, we do an awful lot for them. XPS pension groups, we offer SOC services into them, and they offer portals for pensions for all blue light organizations and government organizations. I will now hand over to you, Graham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Graham Hawkey. I am a PAM specialist at Cerium. I'll be taking you through the presentation today, which is around ransomware and the dangers of third-party access. I've been working in this particular IT sector for probably nearly 9 years actually now coming up to. So we'll move on and we'll talk a bit about Cerium to start with. So Cerium is a UK-based headquartered organisation, specialised in privileged access management, privileged endpoint management, so EPM, and privileged process automation. So we have 3 products as an organisation. All of our products are easy to deploy, simple to use, simple to administer, and we help you along the way as trusted advisors alongside you, whether you're deployment and being a customer. As you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, we've got a number of customers. We work across lots of different industry sectors. We don't particularly work in any different to any others. We're protecting customers with privileged access management, endpoint privilege management, and privileged process automation, helping them to secure their infrastructure for things like third-party access and auditing and compliance around privileged accounts usage. Also, we have a number of NHS customers, particularly a good space for us. I work with probably up to around 40 to 50 of those NHS trusts as well regarding privileged access management. So we'll start with a piece around ransomware in the news, as Rick mentioned earlier, and probably catch us discussing at the beginning of the call. Ransomware is one of the main topics that you'll see in the news if you look. There's lots and lots of different attacks taking place. Recently, we've had some high priority customers in the high priority brands in the news, things like Boots, etc., being attacked by ransomware attacks. And recently, we had the Met Police as well. So it's going on all of the time. There's various different flavors of it. It's, go back to 2017, back to WannaCry, when ransomware is more sort of coming in and attacking the endpoints, locking those down so people can get access to their data. Well, data is now everywhere. Data is cloud, data's on-prem, data's in service providers. So it's all about protecting that. So the threats moved on slightly from then, and now ransomware attacks are generally looking to propagate on systems, target systems in an environment. So they're going to look at your core critical infrastructure, things like backups, domain controllers, somewhere where they can get a foothold in the environment, and they can then call on that ransom. And as Rick was mentioned earlier in the call, a lot of them will actually get a ransom and then still do something with your data. So there's still a threat, even if you pay them, that data can be exported and then infiltrated and put online somewhere, so people can get access to information they clearly shouldn't be able to. So we'll walk through a brief attack. Majority of attacks take place with things like on the front end, as we see here. Still very common today is things like email attachments. We all get told by IT not to click on things that we don't know or don't see. It's quite common now. You see that quite often. So there are still people clicking on these links or being duped into doing things by inputting information into login screens and all different types of things that scrape and collect that information. So one of the most common entry points still in today's times is the misuse or stolen or lost credentials, which are then either leaked or stolen and then used to gain entry into the organization. So always protect the front end of your business with your endpoints, laptops, desktops, because most people that work for organizations today don't usually come into a building anymore and sit at a desk. It's very remote. And the other part, which we're going to discuss today, is a lot of organizations have outsourced services to managed service providers and various different things like PCI environments where they're taking credit card payments. There's specialist organizations that deal with this type of thing now, but those specialist organizations become an attack vector for things like ransomware, because you can attack one organization in supply chain, and then you can get access to that customer base of that particular organization. So it's again, if you look at a lot of the attacks in the news recently, they all seem to be going after supply chain to get access to an organization's data. So once they've made entry into the business, they're looking to steal those credentials if they haven't already done so, as I mentioned, as something to get into the business. So once they get access to credentials or data, they're now starting to take a bit of a foothold in the organization. This could take days, months, years, for instance. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Generally, once they get in, they'll start to move around and get access to be able to infect documents, applications, or anything on file stores or cloud-based applications that they can get hold of. So once they've got a hold in the environment and they've got credentials, then they're looking for privileged credentials. Administrator accounts are the target. So once you get hold of administrator account, that's the main aim of the ransomware, because then it can propagate the payload onto a system over here that could be critical to your organization. The backup, for instance, we've done a lot of work around backup protection for companies against ransomware attacks. Once they've got hold of that system, then they can take down or offline your systems, and then you'll struggle to recover from it because you generally won't have a backup to recover from. So either they're going to offer a ransom for you to pay, or they're going to leak your data. So, and in most cases we see nowadays, as I said previously, both of those things happen. So you've got there's no necessity to say that they're definitely going to pay. They're definitely going to give you your data back. So what we'll do is we'll look at endpoint privilege management first. We'll start on this. This is now into sort of show you some of the products that we do. Endpoint privilege management is the part at the beginning of the ransomware attack where we have removed local administration rights from the laptops and desktops that people are using in the environment, either remotely or on premise in the office. and then allowing those people to interact with the applications they require for their job. So not allowing them to access things that they don't require, not allowing them to have anything to do with privileged passwords on their endpoint. So there's no escalation, there's no elevation that else take place. Only elevation that is allowed to take place is by policy, which is aligned with their account or the group of users that they sit with. So what we do is we start with an EPM server, which is deployed into an environment, to a customer's estate. It can be Active Directory based, it can be Azure based, and it can be hybrid. We then put the product into a learning mode. So policy learning mode allows us to start to understand what's going on, who needs access to what type of application. Adobe, Visual Studio, for instance, those type of applications that people use for their job. EPM clients are deployed onto the workstations across the environment to allow us to now talk to those clients without needing the fact we don't need those local accounts for those highly privileged passwords anymore. Once we've gone through a learning mode process, either in a proof of concept or deployment phase, it's usually a couple of weeks, that leads to us building up a policy library, which can then be enforced, so they're automatically creating the policies for the user groups. Then they can be assessed and pushed out into the policy list and into the hardened mode for the product. So we take it from learning mode to hardened mode. The policies take precedence in the environment, and now users can interact by going through the workflow of the policy and then elevating the application, still staying in the context always of a standard user. If we need to add policies, we might miss one. For instance, say someone needed access to Visual Studio and we hadn't captured that as part of the policy learning mode. People can request policy access. If it's a valid request, we can add it to the policy library, and people can now get access. Users can now get access to that whenever they need to. If it's something that we don't want to do, we can push that back, and we can deny that type of access to an application we don't like. Also, one of the other benefits of it is temporary admin access. So if we want to grant access to people that need access, like myself, I might be working on a customer's site and I need access to Wi-Fi or something, I can automatically ask for a generation code. So I can get a token code, which I can input into my machine and then get a valid code that will give me access for a certain period of time. And then for those users, finally, that would need access very, very regularly, so they might be calling the help desk on a regular basis to get access, we can give them self-approval. So that could be something like a developer. And the main use cases you see for this when customers come to us is they have one of two problems. First problem is they have local admin rights enabled across the environment. Very common. It allows people to be productive. They can get on and carry on with their job function, but it also lowers the security posture of the organization. So by deploying EPM server as a hub in the middle of your organization and granting access through to the applications people are allowed to for their job function, you're controlling the access points for all of the users coming in with no local administration rights running at all. Which takes me on to a bit more around privileged access management now. So where we've just talked through the protection of the endpoints, the entry point into the business, so controlling that type of access. Now we're talking about privileged access management, where we're controlling access from the PAM server. So people coming in from administration access into your environment need access to switches, servers, firewalls, routers, any type of infrastructure that you're running, whether that's web-based or on-prem or cloud. So one of the things I just wanted to draw your attention to is this statement from one of our customers actually talking about privileged access management and protecting your credentials, the crown jewels that give access to those systems. It's good to maintain that control across your privileged accounts and make sure that you've got that in control as a solution. There are other tools and things that you'll need to deploy. As Rick mentioned at the beginning, there's a number of other things that you need to deploy to give you that robust, resilient security across your whole infrastructure. But PAM is one of those tools, and it's very important to be thinking about those security controls as you move forward with ransomware protection. And some of the business drivers I just wanted to draw your attention to, because obviously we're talking about ransomware today, so ransomware protection, things like backup systems that I've mentioned earlier. Good point to start with, those type of critical systems securing. Third-party vendor access is the next thing we're going to talk about through the flow of PAM, and that also ties into things like securing remote access. So anyone with any type of access which is remotely to your organization, whether they're external supply chain, whether they're an internal employee that's working from home. Still very similar use cases from my perspective. Those people should be treated as if they're coming in externally to your organization. As we've seen recently, there's been a shift towards multi-factor authentication in some of the compliance drivers. There's things like DSP, Toolkit for NHS, are mandatory for admins and remote users to have MFA enabled. And also, just wanted to draw your attention to something that also ties into all of this. Cyber insurance requirement. We've seen a big uptake in companies that have big drivers from cyber insurance policies to maintain and make sure that they have in place the right tool sets and procedures to protect themselves against things like ransomware attacks. Commonly, Cirium is one of those parts with privileged access management. So if we look at a typical workflow for privileged access management from a third party, let's take a third party through so they can have access to some systems which reside in your network. So the third party is non-privileged user from the context. We always have non-privileged users outside of PAM. If they want privilege, they have to go through the workflow of PAM to get access to the target systems they support for their job. So it could be a switch, it could be a server, etc., or an Office 365 interface, those type of applications or services. So the non-privileged user would log in through the web-based browser. They input their credentials, so they can be a mix of different credentials. It could be local, credentials, so not through Active Directory. That's quite a chosen path for a number of organizations setting up third parties. Some will have them AD based, and some are even SAML. So it just depends on where you are on your journey with things like cloud. We can incorporate all of those, or a mix of those is very common. Once they've used that credential to enter the environment, they have to go through a multi-factor authentication step. So MFA is built into the platform. We have that built into our own proprietary product. So it's our own self-contained MFA. You can use others, but most of our customers are using our own platform that we've built in. Once they've done that, they will then be able to cross across the virtual air gap to the hub, which is the PAM appliance in the middle. It's a pair of appliances, which is highly available, which then gives access to the target systems. So no credentials ever go back to the non-privileged user, and very importantly as well, as we just mentioned, the EPM, to that workstation that they're coming from. So that's completely clean of credentials and accounts that require privilege being sent to it. We're injecting on the user's behalf, on the privileged user's behalf, the credentials, the keys, or the passwords that are used for the session into the target system. The same with the tools. If we're using a tool, a snap-in, a managed website or something like AWS or Office 365, exactly the same process applies. So we're elevating the user with the right account that they use from the PAM appliance into the target system, injection of the passwords, and then rotation. So it's nice, clean, easy, simple to use, robust, resilient system that's trusted and used by a number of organizations to protect against third-party access. So if we look at some of the dangers around third-party access, there are a number of these. One of the things I just want to mention, though, is there are dangers around third-party access, but it is a necessity of modern life. The way that we're dispersed, and even since COVID, everyone is completely globally dispersed or remotely working pretty much now, and that is something that ransomware attackers prey on. They're looking for vulnerabilities or being able to get into anything where they can gain access to things. So third parties are very, very common, and it's going to become more and more of an attack vector as I see it as we move forward through time. So control over your privileged access accounts, especially your third parties and suppliers and partners, to understand who has access to your environment, when they have access to it, and how they have access to it. Very important. Limit the access. So limit what other users, limit what third parties can do in your environment. If they only need access to one application, provision that access to that one application, record it. Don't give them access to anything else if they don't need it. But Cirium it lends itself to be very easy to segment different sections of the organization to allow different types of access. So only provision the access for the user that they need to for that particular. And if you do want to give them access to something behind a workflow, like a just-in-time approval, then we can do that as well. So They might manage your firewalls, for instance, but you might not want them getting on the firewalls till after hours. So we can provision that so they can ask and request that type of access. And very importantly, giving back visibility to IT leaders and management, senior management in the organization, to show the visibility and control over the privileged accounts that are being used, what they have access to and where. Okay, excellent. That brings me on to question time. So please ask some questions. I'll give you a few moments to pop them in, and then we'll come to those. So just a couple of seconds if you can pop those questions in, and we'll answer those in a second. So I'll give you a minute there.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay, just give them a minute. Just look on my phone. There's a question coming in. 1 second. My eyes aren't so good. I could do with my glasses on. Right, someone's asking, we are concerned about ransomware and we'd like to get something in potentially pretty fast. How quick can the Cerium be deployed? That's a really good question, actually. So Cerium is extremely fast deploy. As I mentioned earlier, it's easy to use, fast deploy. Probably one of the fastest PAM solutions in the market, I would say. We can have our privileged access management system up and running within a morning. In proof of concepts, very often I have the first connection made and someone being able to use the platform to connect to a Windows server, for instance, and record that session within a couple of hours. So we're really quick on that. So if you want to learn more about that, let us know and we can set up another meeting to discuss further. Another question here. Someone must have picked up on the automating appliance that I had on my diagram. So you were spot on for spotting that. Is there a way of automating more of the processes you've talked about? Really, really good question. Yes, so you may have noticed there was an automation appliance on my PAM diagram. I didn't want to draw too much into too many products today, so I picked 2. But yeah, you've realized that we do another one, as I previously mentioned. But what that can do is the ability to start automating processes to where you think about people connecting manually to carry out certain processes and tasks in the environment. Could be help desk, could be service desk. We can start to automate those now. So if you'd like a conversation around how we can help you automate privilege, let us know and we can set up another call. We'll take another question. Here we go, here's one. We recently had an audit where compliance was flagged, which is common for us. We find this a lot. One of the main concerns was around privileged accounts. How can you help with compliance? Really, really good question, actually. Yeah, so we can help with that. If that's something you want to look at further, we can set up a separate call and help you with a sort of health check type approach. We can do a bit of a discovery around your audit, find out what particular points that they weren't particularly that keen on, and then we can help you and advise of what would be a good remediation to that particular issue. That's a really good question. Please get in contact for more. We'll stop the questions there. If you've got any other questions, I think there's a few more come in. We're going to address those directly after the presentation today. So that just brings me on to the final slide to say, thank you very much for your time in attending today and listening to myself and Rick talk to you about ransomware and the dangers of third-party access. There's a couple of documents here which I've posted on the screen. One's a white paper, one is I think they're both white papers actually. One is around privileged access management. Buyer's guide gives you a really in-depth understanding around checklists to look out for privileged access management if you're thinking of buying it. And then there's a ransomware document talks about the threats to backups, which we've discussed in the show. If you would like to take our offer and would like a health check or anything like that, please get in contact with me or Rick, and we can follow up with you to book that in. And we look forward to spending time with you. That's all from me today. I don't know if Rick's got anything else to add at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate your support, and thanks for the presentation. That was great. There is a couple of things that I'd like to say. Thank you for everybody for attending. We wouldn't be able to run this until unless you did attend, so I really appreciate it. Thanks ever so much. We are running multiple webinars, and we are running a webinar on the 18th of October, and if anybody's interested, it's called Fish and Tips, because phishing is obviously rife at the moment and one of the hardest areas to protect against. And we have some good tips coming up on what not to do, kind of thing, and how to protect against those that vector, really. And that's being held on Wednesday, the 18th of October at 10 a.m. And no doubt we'll send you an email and invitation to that. But thanks ever so much, Graham. Awesome as usual. Brilliant. Thanks everybody, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.